She says she's liberated now, that the ink carved into her skin represents rebirth, power, art. But if Freud were here, he wouldn't admire the designs, he'd listened for the silence beneath them. Because when agony can't find language, it bleeds into visuals. When suffering stays buried, it becomes something you can frame, decorate, aestheticize. You see the surface, just a tattoo. She feels a return to a moment when she was voiceless, defenseless. Each stroke isn't just a choice, it's a trace, an imprint of a forgotten cry. Because somewhere, the fragile girl she used to be, the one who was overlooked, dismissed, unprotected, she's still whispering through the patterns. And now, through this ink, she's finally screaming. The tattoo isn't rebellion. Translation, it's her silence turned into script. Her pain dressed up as autonomy. This is the theater of her trauma, and her skin is the only stage that won't interrupt her. And as a man, you must stop seeing random art and start reading emotional. Morse code, that butterfly, that third eye, that quote about resurrection. They aren't trends. They're psychological, TIMESTAMPS. This isn't style, it's survival strategy. It's what she says when she can't say it. Her body writes what her mouth can't pronounce. Freud would have called it displaced mourning. She wants you to admire the beauty, but more than that, she wants you to notice. Because no one ever really did. Her pain wasn't witnessed. Her story wasn't validated. Her memories were buried so deep she had to carve their ghosts into her own skin just to feel real. You're not dating a girl with tattoos. You're speaking to a diary without pages, and every symbol you admire. It's a place she still fears to enter with words. She's not strong because she has ink. She's surviving because she turned her ghosts into geometry. Because chaos on her skin feels safer than chaos in her heart. The abandonment, the neglect, it's all there. She drew a cage she could decorate. She controls the story now, even if the ending's still the same. And here's the twist, the deeper you get, the more likely you are to touch wounds you didn't inflict. Because the pain wasn't caused by you, but it might get unleashed on you. Her trauma wears your name before you even earn it. She's already bracing for you to vanish like the rest. Freud warned us, when the psyche is gagged, the body paints a mural, and that mural can be breathtaking. Lines, color, quotes that sound like hope. But don't be fooled by beauty. Beauty doesn't ache, ink doesn't shiver, and charm doesn't carry the weight of things never said. You're not just looking at a tattooed woman, you're standing before a map of unspoken grief, a mosaic of memories she couldn't metabolize, a masterpiece of sorrow disguised as design. That butterfly, it doesn't just mean transformation, it means survival. It means she made art from what tried to kill her. She calls it liberation. She says every inked line is a memory claimed, a rebellion made visible. But if you've lived long enough, if you've crawled through your own wreckage and stood back up, you'll see it for what it really is. Not rebellion, not empowerment. It's grief, disguised as control. When she couldn't stop the chaos on the inside, she etched order onto her skin. When the pain refused to speak, she gave it patterns. That's what Freud was pointing to. When the soul breaks and cannot scream, the body takes up the burden. And when no one listens to the body either, it decorates its agony and calls it art. Look deeper. That butterfly isn't freedom, it's a dead girl's whisper trapped in color. That mandala isn't spiritual, it's a cage built from pretty geometry. That quote about survival, it's not wisdom, it's a prayer whispered between panic attacks. You think she's choosing beauty, but she's trying to survive ugliness. She doesn't trust her own emotions, so she curates an aesthetic, a still life painted over living wounds. You see ink. She feels control, because if she can control what you see, maybe she won't drown in what she feels. Her body became a flag of defiance, but it was hoisted over a battlefield. No. One talks about there's no vanity in those lines. They're warnings. Unread letters to a world that failed to protect her. Every design is a border, a silent, "This is mine now." Not because she wanted it that way, but because one day she learned that silence was more violent than anything. You call her brave, but it wasn't bravery, it was necessity. The only way to reclaim what was taken. She became the architect of her own skin because no one else built her a safe place. The tattoo is not a decoration. It's a locked door with a smile drawn on it. And you're just standing outside, mesmerized by the doorframe, while the house inside is burning. You want to love her, maybe even save her, but you can't save someone who's made their pain a monument. You can't reach someone who's tattooed their trauma into myth. She doesn't want your touch, not really. She wants your gaze to stay exactly where she allows it, on the symbols, on the story she's crafted, because going deeper means disturbing the grave she's buried her real self in. You think you're kissing her, but what you're really holding is the armor she welded to her loneliness. And it's beautiful, but it bleeds. You won't see the scream unless you know how to hear silence. You won't feel the wound unless you've been wounded too. Most men won't. They'll compliment the ink, chase the curves, romanticize the rebellion. They'll say she's unique, expressive, wild. But they won't see the girl who never had a voice, who now speaks only through symbols. And if you miss that, if you fall for the surface, you'll one day wake up next to her and realize you're not sleeping with a woman. You're sleeping with her story, one you never really read, one that might one day turn on you, not because you're guilty, but because her pain needs somewhere to land. She's not hiding, she's broadcasting, but the signal's encrypted. And if you don't know the code, you'll confuse her symptoms for personality, her wounds for wisdom. Don't get it twisted, you're not with a strong woman. You're with someone who turned her skin into a map of survival. She's not trying to seduce you. She's trying not to vanish. The tattoo is not the art. The tattoo is the mask. And beneath that mask is a girl, still waiting for someone, anyone, to finally see her before she had to draw herself into existence. Asterisk, you're not looking at just a woman with tattoos. You're staring into a silent autobiography, not written with ink, but etched with survival. Every symbol on her skin is a remnant of something buried, something she couldn't say out loud. And if you walk into her life thinking it's just style, you'll be blindsided by a story you were never meant to interrupt. Freud once said, "What we repress always returns, not as memory, but as symptom." Her body carries those symptoms. In color and contour, the desire you feel, it's real, but it's shaped by an unspoken past. A past that taught her how to turn trauma into art, pain into visual pleasure, seduction into self-defense. That butterfly on her wrist, not beauty. Survival, that dagger on her hip, not danger, boundary. She doesn't wear ink to express who she is. She wears it to shield who she was never allowed to be. You think you're watching a woman in control, but most men don't realize that control is her way of never being hurt again. She enjoys the gaze, not because she wants to be objectified, but because being seen on her terms is the only way she's found to rewrite the past. The moment someone looks too closely, touches too deeply, or sees past the canvas, she recoils. Because in that moment, she's no longer the painter, she's the raw material. And that terrifies her. Seduction for her is ritual. It's not about closeness, it's about reclaiming power. She needs to be the one who chooses, the one who provokes, because once, long ago, she didn't have that power. She wasn't asked, she was taken. Now, she flips the script. But the lines haven't changed. Only the roles. You might think she's chosen you, that her eyes, her touch, her words mean you're different. But the truth is, you're stepping into a play already in progress. You're not the lead, you're a mirror. And if you don't reflect the version of herself she needs to see, she'll shut the curtain without warning. Not out of cruelty, but out of preservation. She doesn't discard you, she retreats from the version of herself that your presence threatens to expose. The man who sees her ink and thinks freedom hasn't understood a thing. Those lines aren't wings, they're fences, painted over the places where someone once climbed in without knocking. The curves you admire, they were once battlegrounds. Now they're carefully curated art, not for admiration, but for control. She may act uninhibited, she may say she's open, wild, free, but watch the way she orchestrates everything. The tone, the pace, the silence between words. Sex isn't vulnerability to her, it's strategy. It's a stage where she directs the lighting, the angles, the scene changes. And if you misread the script, if you step out of character, she'll vanish emotionally, sometimes even physically. Because connection scares her more than solitude. Intimacy is the one act that demands she let go. And she can't afford to let go, not when holding on is the only thing keeping her from drowning. If you ever ask for more, for truth, for softness, for real affection, you'll see the fear, not of you, but of being seen without the costume, because she doesn't know who she is beneath it yet. And being loved without the mask, that's the most terrifying exposure of all. Freud once said, when the psyche can't scream, the body whispers. She didn't choose silence, she was pushed into it. Every time she tried to speak her truth, the world looked away. Now her skin does the talking. Marks, symbols, bodies, turned into open wounds stitched with ink. She commands attention, but doesn't know what to do with tenderness. You think you're touching a woman, but you're really grazing a monument to unresolved sorrow, a body that sexualized its own survival, just to stop repeating the pain. And if you step in with anything too sincere, anything too soft, you will trigger what she's spent years trying to bury. Freud understood this. The ego doesn't armor up because it's strong, it builds walls because truth burns. She learned early that being fragile meant being left behind, so now she parades strength as a survival tactic. Aesthetic rebellion becomes camouflage. The image of sexual power becomes a distraction. Self-reliance becomes theater. She wants to be seen as untouchable, but behind all the bravado is a terrified child who still flinches at the thought of being truly held. Her strength is real, but it's also rehearsed, it's learned. And if you ever dare to gaze past the performance, if you try to name the pain behind the poetry, you will become the enemy. She might lash out, call it control, call it abuse, when all you did was reach toward what she's been running from. You'll think you've connected after all. She's naked. She lets you see the art, the skin, the fragments. But bearing skin is not bearing soul. Every tattoo is a boundary, a curated glimpse. The unspoken message is clear. Look, but don't ask questions. Want me, but don't truly see me. You'll be tested, constantly, not with confrontations, but with silences, with glances, with the subtle recoil when you try to get close. She needs you to accept the costume she's built, the filtered version, the story that helps her sleep. And if you challenge that, if you offer love without a script sheet, panic, because love has no edits. Love threatens to expose the absence underneath the persona. What she calls liberation is often a perfectly constructed cage. And if you walk in with anything to hold, you'll shake the foundation of what keeps her standing. Real love doesn't flatter the wound, exposes the infection. And that is precisely what she cannot risk. Freud would say, this isn't empowerment, it's a beautifully managed symptom. The trauma isn't healed, it's curated, romanticized, masked as strength, so she doesn't have to dismantle what she's built. She doesn't want to heal. She wants the pain to be worshipped. And you, if you don't stand there and clap, will be accused of betrayal. The woman who labels herself as intense isn't seeking connection, she's crafting theater. Every line inked on her skin is a spell, a barrier, a caption for a story she doesn't want you to edit. She's not building love, she's constructing mythology. She wants to be worshipped from a distance, not embraced up close, because closeness risks collapse. Intimacy could ruin the illusion. And if you ever dare to reach past the armor, to touch the fracture beneath, she vanish. Not because you hurt her, but because you saw her. And to her, being seen is more dangerous than being abandoned. You're not standing beside a woman who's healed. You're standing beside a woman who's mastered camouflage. The ruins were never rebuilt, they were simply decorated. Her ink is not a declaration of strength, it's a disguise. If you ever whisper that you notice, if you ever admit that you see the grief buried under the glamour, she'll retreat. Not because she wants to, but because healing would mean losing the one thing that's kept her safe, performance. It's not recovery, she craves its control over the narrative. And that control depends on you not noticing how much she still hurts. So one day you'll sit in silence, staring at the space she used to fill, wondering why your honesty pushed her away, why your tenderness was punished. And the answer is brutal in its simplicity. You loved her past the costume. You didn't stop at the silhouette. You searched for the soul. And that, to her, is betrayal. Because the script she lives by says, affection must be earned through chaos. Peace to her feels like emptiness. Calm, love, that's not passion, that's danger. Because it demands a version of her that never had to perform. She says she wants a real man, one who understands her wounds. But when she finds him, she runs from his stillness, because stillness forces her to hear her own silence, and she spent years drowning it out. Freud would have called this a compulsion to repeat, a drive to replay old trauma, this time with power. So she keeps choosing fire over shelter, not because she's cruel, but because burning feels familiar. And your calm, your consistency, your refusal to fight these things unravel her. Not because you fail to love her, but because you love her without conditions. And that kind of love demands she show up as someone she doesn't yet know how to be. She is most vulnerable not when she's naked, but when she's genuinely loved. Because love, real love, makes her feel exposed. And exposed, she becomes unsure because the drama she once hated has become her only anchor. Conflict became her compass. Without it, she floats in foreign waters. So if you offer peace, she'll seek the storm elsewhere. She'll leave not because she stopped loving you, but because your presence no longer feeds her inner war. She'll find someone colder, more distant, someone who makes her chase again, because somewhere along the way, she was taught that if it doesn't hurt, it isn't real. And now, the man who gives without games becomes disposable, not because he isn't enough, but because he refuses to play her pain back to her in a language she understands. The ink etched into her skin is not rebellion, it's memory, not artistry, but armor. Each symbol is a scar in disguise, not of battles won, but of wounds she never let close. To her, love was always soaked in blood, so now she wears it proudly, like a haunted map. Any man who tries to touch the heart behind the canvas soon finds it's not love she wants. It's preservation of the myth, the mask, the mythology she built from the rubble. Freud would call it the narcissism of minor difference, the craving for tension, not because it hurts, but because it's familiar. When things go smooth, she vanishes. Serenity suffocates her. Security is a cage, kindness a threat, because it strips away the myth of the scarred heroine who fights alone. The fantasy collapses if she's simply okay. So she'll provoke you, needle you, invent crimes you never committed. She tests how far you bend before you break. And when you finally crack, she'll point and whisper, "I knew it. You're just like the rest." Not because it's true, but because it has to be. If you're different, if you don't fail her like the others, the story dies, and she's not ready to bury it. That story is her spine. You won't fail because you didn't love enough, but because you didn't fit the role of the distant, the dangerous, the disappointment. She needs a villain. If she surrenders that narrative, she loses control. And for a woman who survived on defense, control is oxygen. She doesn't fear heartbreak. She fears exposure. Real love, the quiet kind that asks nothing in return, shakes the walls she's lived behind. You're not fighting for her affection. You're competing with the ghost of a script she memorized to survive. She looks strong, composed, independent, but that's the costume, tailored by pain, stitched with intellect. The truth is softer, trembling, hidden. She flaunts the ink but buries the ache, and she needs you to pretend that strength. Freud said, the unconscious doesn't lie, it leaks. And hers is leaking in every step, every sigh, every sarcastic joke. It cries out in symbols. Abandonment, validation, hunger, fear of vanishing. But she coats it with self-aware slogans. I'm too much, I'm a handful, I'm deep. She baptized her scars and called them personality. You walk in thinking she's a partner, someone to build with. But what you find is a mosaic made from fragments of grief, stitched together with rebellion, sarcasm, and perfectly timed quotes. Try to move one piece, and the whole structure starts to shake. Because her identity isn't built on peace. It's built on how well she's learned to survive the wreckage. She doesn't thank you for trying to understand. She punishes you for getting too close to the ruins. The tattooed woman isn't just a person. She's a performance, layered and rehearsed. Every gesture calibrated to seduce, then repel. She doesn't want to be held. She wants to be recognized as wounded, but untouchable. You think you're walking into her heart, but you're stepping onto a stage she's been performing on for years. Freud would call it a death drive, masked as romance. She doesn't crave love. She craves reenactment, the safety of familiar pain. She rebrands the wreckage. Chaos becomes charm. Panic gets rebranded as passion. Her art is her armor, her ink a shield. And while you're admiring the depth of her complexity, she's making sure you never see the truth behind it. Because that truth, it's fragile, unfinished, and still bleeding. You're not loving a wild spirit. You're loving a system of defense dressed as freedom, a fortress disguised as a muse. She wants your eyes, not your insight, your hands, but not your presence, your validation, but never your questions. Because to decode her is to threaten the mythology she built to survive. She doesn't want to be real. She wants to be worshipped from afar, romanticized like pain in a song lyric. The closer you get, the faster she vanishes. At her core, she yearns to be seen. But the moment you truly see her, she feels exposed, naked in a way no tattoo can cover. So she retreats behind phrases like "I'm too much" or "I'm complicated." It's not vulnerability, it's a preemptive strike. If you leave, at least she was right, and you want to heal her. You want to show her a different ending. But that's not love. That's martyrdom. You don't owe anyone your undoing just because they refuse to let go of theirs. There's a difference between loving someone and becoming a character in their emotional screenplay. Walk away when her pain becomes your prison. Because some women don't want freedom. They want to stay married to their suffering. And if you try to save her, she only writes you into the tragedy too.